getting started. Today's a 2-hour class. We're going to be talking for about approximately an hour and a half, and then we're going to leave the last half hour or so for questions that you might have about how to even get started with the software. Today's class is meant for those that have never used the software before and are wondering a good point to where all the different settings are and where do they start. It's also a great course for those that may have been using it for a while and want a little refresher, and maybe find out all the different settings that are behind the software that they didn't even know existed before. I am taping today's broadcast, and it will be available up on our YouTube page for you to watch it later. I will be sending out a link so that you can link to it later. And again, today's class is getting started in all the different settings. So I'm going to get started now on the Getting Started webinar. And again, any questions, I'm going to deal with those at the very end of the class, but do post your questions up as soon as you think of them, and I'll get to them as soon as we're done the formal part of our training portion. So in the GoToMeeting console that might be running down the right-hand side of your screen right now, you'll see a questions portion where you can type in a question. I'm the only one that can see them, so never be shy or hesitant to ask a question. Type them in there, and I'll read them out at the very end of the class so I can answer everyone's questions. So let's get started. Before we get into any kind of drawing with the software or doing any kind of elements and looking at inserting them, I want to get a really good background knowledge for everyone here on how the software works and all of the various settings that are in the software that can help you draw accurately. So I'm going to start off our lesson by going directly up to the Settings pull-down menu. Under the Settings pull-down menu, I'm going to select on Program Settings. So Settings, Program Settings. This is the dialog box that I like to refer to as the brains behind our software. This is where it's going to look in the background before you do anything so it can do it properly for you. Even in this general page here, you can see that there's settings about how you can even automatically save your work. So if I check the automatic save option there, I can then set a time to how often I want it to save my work in the software. So every 30 minutes, it's going to save my work. So if a big storm whips through and you lose power, at least you know you've only lost at the maximum 30 minutes worth of work, and you can get back on track again. When it does the saves, it also goes through and does another type of save called a backup save. And that's what this setting is here for, number of backups. So every 30 minutes, it's going to come through, do a save of my file, and it's also going to create a backup file. And we call those, the file extension of those are BKP files. Your normal file extension on your work in Envisioneer is going to be a BLD file. And then with our backup files, they're BKP files. So every 30 minutes, it's going to save my BLD file, and it's also going to create a BKP file, a backup file. So if something happens to my original BLD file, I can open my backup file and continue on. 30 minutes later, it's going to do another save of my BLD file. And because I have number of backups too, it's going to create a secondary backup file. So now I'll have two backup files. One 30 minutes ago, and now this one that's fresh. 30 minutes later, it's going to rewrite the original BKP file. And then 30 minutes after that, it's going to overwrite the second one. So I've got two backups. You can set that up to 4 backups if you wish, if you really want to back up your work and keep it saved and safe, just in case something was to ever happen to your original file. At least you know you've got those backup files that you can depend on as well. When you click on the File pull-down menu, I'm just going to come over here. We won't be able to see it since we're in this dialog box. At the very bottom of that dialog box, it's going to show you the last drawings that you had open. And that's this recently used file list. I've got mine set to 1, so I'll see just the very last file that I was working on. But I could set that to 4, and I'll see all 4 of those files listed right here. So I've got quick access, so I can just click on it, and it'll open it up, and I can start drawing again. So these are the recently used files that you were working on, displayed there so that you can quickly open them up. We also have underneath that material history list. So if I'm changing materials on an object, maybe I want to change the hardwood flooring to carpeting or tile, it'll show me the last materials that I used, which can be very handy when you're on a new project and think, what was that paint color I used on the Joneses project? If you went to your recently used file list, it would be pulled up there if it was one that you used recently. And that would be the last 15 materials that you've applied to a project. So that can be quite handy as well. When we start up our projects, we always start up prompting for a template. So if you ever went in our software and hit File and New, you'll notice that there's a list of templates there to get you started. Those templates have pre-saved elements in them and all of different settings to get you started and to have all of those settings already set. So we always want to start up prompting for those templates so you can pick the one that's best for you. I'm going to flip now into on our sheet here, and I'm going to pick on our workspace. Here in our workspace area, just on this left-hand list, this will show me all the different things that are viewable in my workspace. So the first thing that I see in that list is the commander. I've got it checked on. This area down here that I'm highlighting right now at the bottom of the screen is the commander area. So when I type in exact distances, that's where they're going to go. That's our commander area. You'll also see status bars turned on. That's directly below, and I'm highlighting it right now, beneath the commander area. That's a really handy area of our software that you might never have noticed before. It's prompting you all the time when you're in a command for what to do next. So when you pick on the wall tool, it'll say pick the first point you want to start drawing that wall. Always look down into that status bar area for little hints of what to do if it's a brand new command that you've never used before. Scroll bars, those can be here at the bottom of the drawing screen area and running up the left-hand side. Those allow you to scroll through your drawing area, and I've got them turned on. View tabs, those are here at the bottom. I've got my model view, my floor plan view, my elevation view, and we'll get into looking at those a little later in our class today. And we also have the information panel, and that's in our catalog area with our manufacturer logos. I've also got those turned on so you can see the CADSoft logo in the right-hand side in my catalog area. If you can't see to the right-hand side of your screen now because of the GoToMeeting console, you'll notice at the top of your GoToMeeting console that there's a red arrow. There's a little red button with a white arrow on it pointing to the right. If you click on that, that'll minimize that GoToMeeting screen so you can see my entire screen a little bit better if it's very small or it's being hidden by that GoToMeeting console right now. We also allow you to customize your workspace in the software. The toolbar areas you can see right now, I've got them all this blue color. My model view where I'm going to be drawing right out here is white. And when I click on my worksheets, those will be white as well. If you prefer, if you're coming out of a drawing environment that perhaps had the model view in a gray tone or a black screen, maybe you're used to that DOS look in having a black screen, you can change the colors. The only color that I would recommend that you would never set your screen to is the absolute black color, because our cursors and a lot of the dots that we put on the screen are also going to be black. If your screen is black and they're black, you won't be able to see them. So I would leave it at the very least in a gray tone. If you find the white a little harsh on your eyes, you can change this workspace area to gray instead of the white. But having that dark color and going to the absolute black color will not allow you to see your crosshairs very well. So I would recommend a gray if you're finding the white too harsh on your eyes. But you can absolutely change those and customize the screen and the look of the screen to the colors that you prefer. Down below that, you'll see location dimming. And I'm going to get into this a little bit later as we start to draw in our projects. But in the software, you can design up to 999 stories. Good luck. Have fun doing that big of a project. And as you're drawing on each of the locations, you'll be able to see all the other locations. So as I'm drawing on the ground floor, lightly ghosted in the background, I'll be able to see the second floor or my foundation plan. And that allows me to look at those other locations just to make sure I've got clearance if I'm going to be running any plumbing or anything like that. So I'm not running in or interfering with anything that's on a location above or below. They're lightly ghosted. this dimming percentage is the percentage that they're turned off. So they're 90% unviewable. You can see just that 10% of viewable, so they're very light. So if you find that the alternate locations, the one you're not working on, are too light, you'd like to see them a little bit brighter so you can see them a little bit more, you're going to want to decrease that value. Maybe bring it down to only 80%, so you get 20% viewable. But if you're finding that it's too bright, that you can't distinguish between what's on the current location and the other locations, then you're going to want to increase that value. Maybe bring it up to 95%. And then you'll be able to see the difference between there. So you can play with that dimming percentage value. And again, it's just how much dimmed another location is other than the one that you're working on. So if you're working on the ground floor, you'll be able to see your second floor, but it's going to be 90% dim. So it'll be nice and light, so you can still visualize everything and see it, so you're not running into anything in your design. But again, it's just like a piece of onion skin paper put over top of an initial design back in the days of hand drafting. So that's location dimming, and you'll find that very handy if you have something that's maybe too bright or too light. The only other ones that I want to show you on this screen were the ones that I've showed you here. The other ones, I'd highly suggest you leave them set to the values that we have done for them. If you're curious about any of the settings that I'm stepping over and not getting into in today's class, some of them are more advanced settings, and I don't want to spend all of our time going through every single option that we have here. But I will point out that up at the top of the screen and at the top of all of our dialog box in the software, you'll see a question mark. And that's your ticket to get any kind of help. So if you click on that question mark, it brings up our program help. And that will give you all of the various settings that are in here. So you can go back over and say, okay, what was under Workspace? What was she talking about with the commander and the status bar? And you can look at all of those various settings that are in here and read about them as well. So all the ones that we may be just going over today and breezing over, always go back to any of those dialog boxes, click on that help, and read about all those functions as well. On the left-hand side of our dialog box, I'm now going to click on Drawing Aids. These are all little utilities that are going to help you to draw accurately. We've put them all into this Drawing Aids folder part of the Program Settings dialog box. The upper part of this dialog box, Model Viewing, Insertion, and Editing, this allows you when you're picking elements, especially those things that have multi-click elements, like a wall. So when I'm drawing a wall right now, I left-click once, I move my cursor over, I left-click again, and between those 2 points, it's going to form a wall because I've picked the points. For those of you that might be more used to, accustomed to picking and dragging, you could set that to pick and drag. So I left-click, hold my left mouse button, drag it to the point where I want to release the mouse button, and it draws that wall. Would be a good option that has a multi-click element. The software is set up to use pick points. That's the way it's been fashioned, but for those of you that prefer a pick and drag motion, you can certainly change it to that. For single click elements, things that you insert with just one click, my example is going to be a window or a door or a piece of furniture. You simply bring your cursor out onto the drawing screen, you left click once, and it's inserted that element. We have two options for those different types of elements. We have the repeat insertion. So you might have already noticed this. When you insert a window, another window will be already attached to your cursor. Or you insert a cabinet, there's another cabinet already on your cursor again, ready to be inserted. It's because it's been set to repeat insertion. I insert one, I want another one quickly reloaded so I can quickly insert those elements. If you find that annoying and you know that I only want to insert one and be done, then you can set that to a single insertion only mode. So I insert one window, the command is over, I'd have to go back and pick window again. Okay, so those are different options that you have. This next option that you see here in this dialog box called Nudge Distance is one of my favorite little tips in the software. I want everybody right now to look down at your keyboard on your computer and you'll notice your arrow keys. When you've selected an element in the software, like a wall or a cabinet, Once you've selected it, if you click on one of the arrow keys, it's instantly going to move that object in the direction that the arrow key is pointing. So if I pick my up arrow key, the element that I've selected, let's say a cabinet, will move up. The distance that it's moving up is set here in this nudge distance. It's going to move it up 1 inch every time I hit that arrow key. If I hold down the control key at the same time I hit one of those arrow keys, it will jump it up 1 foot. So if you know that there's a value that you like to move your objects, maybe it's a 1/2 inch, maybe it's 6 inches, you can change this nudge distance here. It'll save it, and then every time you hit that arrow key, you know it's going to move it 6 inches or 1/2 inch. So very handy to be able to move things an accurate distance. The nudge command is done by your arrow keys on your keyboard, and this is the distance that it's going to move them. If you look out into my drawing screen area where I'm moving my mouse around right now, you'll see that it looks like a grid. And that's because of this setting below our nudge distance. I've got a check mark in beside enable the grid. Once I've enabled the grid, it looks at all the settings below that. It knows that I want my grid colors to be this light blue color, and it knows I want it to draw it with lines. It also knows that I want to space the grid apart 4 foot by 4 foot. So if you rather see your grid in a 10 foot by 10 foot grid, you'd rather the color be magenta, and instead of lines, you'd rather see dots. You can change any of those settings here. This is where you get to customize it. You can uncheck the grid here, and if I hit apply, you'll notice that it turns off and my drawing screen goes just to white without the grid behind it. Or beside the enable, you'll see the F7 key. So if I hit the F7 key outside of the program settings dialog box, it'll also turn the grid on and off. You'll also notice down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen that I have grid down here as well. So if I'm working and I quickly want to turn on the grid, I don't have to come back into the program settings dialog box. I quickly just move my cursor down to the lower right-hand corner of the screen, click the grid, and it'll turn itself on. So the F7 function key on your keyboard and moving your cursor down here to the grid area will also turn them on and off. Being able to change the settings and the color and the line style and the distance apart of the grid lines, that's all found in here in the program settings dialog box. Moving up towards the upper right-hand side of this dialog box, we then come into snap behavior. We have the object snap, and it's turned on. I would recommend that this should be on 95% of the time that you're drawing. There's only a small time that I would ever turn that off when I don't want two objects finding each other. So what the object snap does is allow two objects to find each other so that they can be accurately placed. So I'm just going to draw in the left-hand side here on my drawing screen. I've got a wall drawn. I've moved my cursor close to this wall because I want to draw a T intersection here with another wall that's going to come into it. As soon as I get my cursor close to this wall that I've already drawn, my cursor should turn into a circle with an X in it, meaning it's snapping, it's found that wall, and that when I start to draw, it's going to create this wall coming off of it, and it's going to create a nice clean intersection, and it's going to erase out this section right in here, so I've got a nice clean intersection going. If I don't see that circle with an X, that means my object snap has not found that wall or that other object that I want to snap to. So I have to move my cursor around until I find it. The distance that you move it around here, you can see my object snap is set to 4 pixels. So think of your screen as made up of all these tiny little pixels to make up the colors on your screen. As soon as I get within 4 pixels of this wall, it's going to snap and find it for me. So if you're finding that you have to be right on top of it and it's not finding it very well, you might want to increase that pixel search distance so that when it gets a little bit closer, it'll find it for you. So object snap, again, should be on 95% of the time. It's very rare that you don't want objects to find each other and snap to each other. But when you do, you can turn it off here by coming into the Program Settings dialog box and unchecking Object Snap, hitting F5 on the function keys that are on your keyboard, or you'll also notice it dock down here in the lower right-hand corner of your screen where I'm moving my cursor right now, I can uncheck or just unhighlight Object Snap down there as well to turn it off so that it's not going to snap things together. But again, I highly recommend always keeping that on. Ortho. For those of you that might have a CAD background, you'll recognize the word ortho. For those of you that are new to the drawing environment, what ortho means is that I am only going to be drawing straight across and straight up and down, and it's always going to form a 90-degree corner, always when ortho is on. So when I want to start drawing angled walls, it's not going to happen with ortho on. I'd either have to come into this program site settings dialog box and uncheck ortho to turn it off, or you'll also notice that it's a function key. So as I'm drawing a wall, if I come up to the next one and I know I want it to come down on an angle, I would just hit the F8 key on my keyboard, and then I can start drawing on angles. Or also docked in the lower right-hand corner of your screen where I'm circling around right now, you'll also notice ortho down there. So I can just click on the word ortho, it turns it off, and now I can start drawing angled walls. When ortho is turned off, angle snap comes into play. Angle snap is going to try to restrict you to nice clean angles. So you can see here that they're going to be in increments of 15 degrees. So I can draw a 15 degree, a 30 degree, a 60 degree. I can draw a 45 degree angle, all those different increments of 15 degrees. If I need to draw a wall or insert an element or rotate an element, maybe 12.5 degrees, I'm going to also have to turn off angle snap. I want ortho off and I want angle snap when I'm drawing to an odd angles like 12.5 degrees instead of 15. So you can do any angle. You can draw a wall at whatever angle you prefer, but to begin with, ortho is going to be on. It's going to restrict you to nice 90-degree corners. I recommend keeping that on when you're first learning to draw. And always, actually, I still always keep my ortho on until I come up to that angled wall. And then I turn it off. I rely on angle snap to give me nice, clean 15-degree angles. And then after that, if it is an odd angle, I turn them both off and I draw to that angle. When I start drawing later on in our class today, I'll show you how to draw on an angle, an odd angle, and also a 30-degree angle as well, so we can see that happening. Grid snap. Grid snap, if I had my grid turned on, would, if this is enabled, would only allow me to move to the coordinates of the grid. So I'd be stuck to that 4 foot by 4 foot. My cursor could not stop in between the grid spacing. It would automatically snap to it and keep you on the coordinates of that grid. That's if I had match grid set. I can also have an invisible grid that is not the same as the grid I'm going to see on my screen. You can see I've got it 1 inch by 1 inch here, and that's a custom spacing. So my cursor can only go to full inches or full feet. So if you're finding that you're trying to draw and it's really getting inaccurate because you're going to the 16th or sometimes to the 64th of an inch, and you want to just be full inches, having the grid snap on might be handy for you. Grid snap, however, is a big culprit in our software, in our technical support center. We get a lot of calls in with people saying, I'm trying to insert this element and it just will not insert where I want it to go. I need that cabinet to sit exactly right here, and it always moves it over like 2 inches. I can never get where I want it to go. The first thing that we do is have them check, do you have grid snap on? Well, yes, I do. Grid snap is snapping you to to the points on that grid. So if that point where you want to move that cabinet is off the grid, it will not allow it to happen. So if you're ever in that circumstance where you're trying to insert something and it will not go on, check to make sure grid snap is turned off. Grid snap is also, and I'm circling around it right now, down in the lower right-hand corner of my screen. So you don't have to come back into this dialog box to check if grid snap is on or off. You can also see it down the lower right-hand corner. And also by hitting F4, the function key on your keyboard, that will turn grid snap on or off for you. So if you did want to turn it back on or off, you can do it that way as well. Okay, so grid snap can be very handy. It will restrict you to just drawing to certain measurements, but it also can be a big culprit. If you forget that it's on and you're trying to insert something that's off the grid, it won't allow it to happen. Down below that, we have snap tracking. Snap tracking is a very handy feature in our software, and I'm going to give a practical example when I start drawing it. Basically, and I'm just going to draw a quick L-shaped house over here to the corner. What snap tracking allows me to do is I just hover my cursor over a corner, so this corner that I'm kind of drawing a circle over, and then it will show me how to be perfectly in line with that corner. I can hover my cursor over 2 points, and it will show me where those would exactly intersect. So if you're trying to put in a column in that area, very handy so you know that they're lined up with those 2 corners. Snap tracking is a great feature, and again, when I start drawing the walls in our example project today, I'm going to be using snap tracking to show you exactly how it works. Under that, we have auto scroll. You might start drawing a project and you might zoom in, and then you're starting to draw and, oh, I need to go past the boundaries of the drawing screen area. I need to look past that. Just by resting your cursor up against the drawing screen edge and holding down your control key, it's active with the control key, you'll start to scroll automatically. So just place your cursor close to the side, hold down the control key, and you'll start to, it's like the paper is moving, and it's moving over that way so that you can see what might be over to the left or to the top of your screen that's hidden because you're zoomed in too close. That's called scrolling, and just by holding again the control key, you can do that. If you find that, whoa, it's scrolling way too fast, that's why we have these speed controls down here. You can move it to the left to slow it down or move it to the right to speed it up. So if you find it's scrolling way too slow, move it over. And that is enabled by holding down the control key on your keyboard. So these are all settings here under the drawing aids that help you to draw accurately by looking at the grid, by snapping to the grid, by having ortho on so that you're drawing nice and straight, by having our object snap so objects are snapping together, by using that snap tracking so you can find those 2 points and where they would theoretically meet, and using auto scroll so that allow you to scroll quickly to points past the zoom in point that you have on your screen currently. We have more utilities that help you drawing accurately under the building aids options here on the left hand side that I'm highlighted on now as well. The very first one in the list, collision control, is a fantastic tool in our software. Collision control is what gives intelligence to all of the objects in the software. So when I grab a chair as an example, and I move it into a room and I get it close to the wall, the collision control will not allow the wall to sit, the chair, excuse me, to sit on the wall lines. It knows the two will collide and it'll stop them from overlapping each other. It'll also allow the chair to automatically turn because it knows it wants the back of the chair up against the back of the wall. So it gives it that added intelligence to the objects. With collision control, it also won't allow you to put anything in that doesn't fit. So you can't crowd something in and say, yeah, that'll fit in there, and it really won't work. If it's not going to work, collision control will not allow you to do that. So it gives you that kind of safety net around trying to fit something in when it shouldn't. Collision control will stop you from allowing things to not fit, but if it will just fit, it'll also stop it from happening as well, because it wants you to stop and think, will it really fit? Good example of that, think of a stairwell. You've drawn two walls 3 foot apart. You're about to drag in a set of stairs that are 3 feet wide. The stairs will not go into that stairwell because the walls are exactly 3 feet wide, the same distance of the width of the stair. I want you to stop and think, did you think about drywall? Is there really enough space there? And then if you know that there's enough space and you do want it to still go into that defined space, you turn collision off. To turn collision off, you can uncheck it here in this dialog box. But much easier than that, you can just hit the F9 function key on your keyboard, or down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see collision. Once collision's off, you can freely move that set of stairs between those two walls. If you turn collision back on again, it's not going to make the stairs fly back out of that space. Once they're set, and they will remain there. It's just allowing you to place them and get them in there. But when something's set, it's in the position they are. It can't just throw it back out again. So collision control gives intelligence to the objects, so it only allows them to fit where they would fit. It allows them to automatically rotate as they get close to another object, and it doesn't allow them to overlap. Great, great tool. But when you find it fighting against you, when you're trying to put something in that will fit, that just fits, just turn collision off, place the object, and then turn it back on again. Underneath that, there's an option there called Select Elements on Current Location Only while you're in a plan view. So that means when I'm working on a plan view and I have multiple locations like we talked about before, I'm working on my ground floor, but I can lightly ghost and see the elements on my second floor. Those elements on my second floor, it's like they're under a sheet of glass. I can see them, but I can't touch them because I can select elements on the current location only while I'm in plan view because of this particular option here. So say you have a change that comes along in a project. Here comes back the Petersons. The Petersons say, oh, you know what? We need that room to be 5 feet wider. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, I've made so many changes to this plan. That's going to affect the third floor, the second floor, the foundation, my ground floor. All of them need to be 5 feet wider. So that's when you're going to come along into this dialog box and uncheck this. So while you're in plan view, you can select all the locations all at once and move them all at once, all at the same time. Because with this checked, you'd have to move the ground floor, then the second floor, then the third floor, then the foundation. But with it unchecked, you can select all the locations at one time. So you might be thinking, well, then I want that unchecked all the time. I always want to be able to move every location all the time. We keep this checked here because it's very, very common if you do have this unchecked that, oh yeah, I'm going to move that wall and move it, and then realize, oh, that was on the second floor. That wasn't on my ground floor. I've got my dimming percentage, what we looked at in our workspace options, up too high that I really can't distinguish between second floor and ground floor very well, and I inadvertently moved the wrong wall. Happens a lot. So we keep this checked until you have to do that major design change. So let's hope the Petersons don't come back on a regular basis. We can keep checked for good and not have to make those major changes. But when they do come along, know that you can make sweeping changes to multiple locations at the same time by unchecking this. Underneath that, you'll see Enforce Material Usages, and that's going to become from using our material paintbrush, this little tool that I'm hovering my cursor over right now. This material paintbrush allows me to paint on new finishes. So I might change a wall color, different paint, or I might apply wallpaper, or I might change the look of the shingles on the roof. Enforced material usage means that if I tried to put shingles on an interior wall, it's going to say, hey, these are shingles. They're meant for a roof, not a wall. Are you sure you want to do that? And if you click OK, the shingles will be applied to the wall. It'll allow you to do it. But it's just thinking, did you really mean to pick on the wall, or were you just picking and picked on something you didn't mean to? So that's what enforced material usage does. It'll ask you a question if you're trying to use material where it's really not meant to go. Enable solid filling. Great, great tool. Just by checking this option, and when I click Apply and OK, any walls that I've drawn will automatically be darkened in. So if I'm doing a presentation set of drawings and I want to darken in the walls, fill them all in with black ink, boom, it's done automatically. It's a setting with the walls that they have solid fill as one of their settings, and as soon as this is checked on, it'll automatically turn it on for you. So if you're creating a presentation style drawing, make sure you enable the solid filling, and it'll give it that nice presentation professional look that you're looking for. I'm going to uncheck that because we're not going to use it right away. When you're placing windows and doors, you have the ability to type in a dimension that you know they are away from a corner. So if I knew the window or the door was exactly 5 feet away from the corner, I could type in 5 feet, and it would insert that window or door 5 feet away from that corner. What this option here allows me to do is that 5-foot dimension to the edge of the window or door, or to the center of the window or door? And this is where you can set it. The default is to edge, but if you're looking at a set of plans that you're trying to duplicate and all of the dimensions on that set of plans are to center, then you can change this to center, and then when you type in those dimensions, it'll move that window 5 feet to the center line of that window or door. Dynamic dimensions. We're going to take a look at those when we start to draw our models just right shortly. But basically, when I draw walls and I select a wall afterwards, it will show me dimensions. It'll automatically show me the length of the wall and the distance away from the perpendicular wall. Those dynamic dimensions can go to the outer surface, so out to my veneer, my siding, my stucco, my brick, my stone, or they can go to the edge of the core, my stud line. So if you want your dimensions to, when you're reading them on screen, and this is just for on-screen dimensions, this isn't for your full dimensions, just on-screen, do you want the on-screen dimensions to be to the surface or the core? And that's where you can select that. In the software, as soon as I draw my building, a floor is automatically put inside the room. Its default selection is a hardwood floor. You might have noticed if you've drawn a room, hey, there's already a hardwood floor in there. How handy is that? And as I subdivide the house into rooms, they'll automatically be separated into separate floors. That's our automatic floor tool that's doing that. Those floors are meant for the finished surface only. It's not part of the structural floor. So if you're happy with the automatic floor and the surface that it's giving you, you can keep that checked. The automatic floors have some limitations. They will not allow you to cut a hole into them, and they cannot be dragged or shifted in their shape. They're always going to cling to the walls in that room. So if you find that limiting, you can uncheck this and manually insert your own floors. The options here to the right-hand side, the window opening symbols, type 1 or type 2, this is just because we ship all around the world in 4 different languages, and down in Australia, they show their opening symbols exactly opposite of us. So we give them the opportunity to set their opening symbols the way they like it. That's the same with door swing. This changes from company to company that I visit. I'll visit one company, and they'll say, well, I put my back up against the jamb, and I swing it in. It's my right-hand swing, or I swing it out. It's my left-hand swing. And other companies know it's the way you grab the door and you open it determines your left or your right hand. Huge debate anytime I go to an office for training of what is actually a right-hand door and a left-hand door. So depending on how you were taught or how you like to call out a right or a left-hand door, we give you that option of being able to select that here of what you determine as a right-hand or a left-hand door. And I know in your mind you're thinking, well, of course, a right-hand door is a right-hand door. But you'd be surprised how many people call it out exactly opposite of you. Depends, I think, on their training of either being a carpenter on site or a door salesman. I think of both of them are, in my coming across, both call them out differently. And speaking of doors and windows, we have the ability to stretch openings. So when I see a window or a door in 3D, I can click on it and I can stretch it out, make it bigger or taller as I need to. And as it's making it bigger or longer, it's also going to rename it using the properties of the length and the width that I've stretched it to. So that's kind of a handy tool. You might want to turn that off if you only want to specify exact window sizes. So if you don't want to get into any custom window size, which stretching would make you do, if you stretch out a window, it could go to an oddball custom size. If you never want to get into custom windows, you want to pick specifically from a list the exact window sizes, then you can uncheck Enable Stretch Openings, and that would turn that off for you. Okay, so those are building aids, again, a way of helping you to draw accurately and to choose the choices that best suit the way that you want to draw. Underneath that, on the left-hand side, we have units of measurement. Again, we ship around the world in 4 different languages, so we have to respect both the imperial and the metric system. And depending on the one that you want to use, we can also get down to different percentages in precision. So with the software, you could get right down to the 64th of an inch in drawing your walls. Your carpenter's going to scream at you. He's not going to like you when he gets on site and seeing that your drawings are down to the 64th of an inch. Kind of impossible to set the walls to that, but you can get down to that precision. Or if you'd like to see them right up to the ½ inch, you can do that to make it easier for you to draw. You can also call it out in feet and inches, pure inches, feet, or for those of you that are familiar with the 16th method, you can also use that as well if you prefer it. I'm going to leave mine at feet and inches, which is the default, and at 16ths of an inch, which is also the default. We can also set the precision for area, volume, and angles. So right now the default for angles is just a pure angle, but if I wanted to get into decimal degrees, I can go right down to tenths and hundredths and thousandths if I wanted to. And precision, I'm going to leave that mine at just the full angles. But knowing that if I type in now 12.5 degrees, it's going to truncate off the 0.5 degrees. It'll be just 12. And I won't see the 0.5 because I've told that I only want to work to a precision of full degrees. If I come back later and change this to maybe hundredths or thousandths, it will then say that that is 12.5 degrees. It knows it's 12.5, it's holding that, but it's truncating that off in any values that it's going to show you because you've told it you only want to work to full angles. Okay. The other options that we have in the Program Settings dialog box are personal preferences. So you can set the boundary information, the background, what type of background when you go into 3D, what the terrain looks like, how big it is, where you are in the world, what time of day it is, so that when you do your photorealistic renderings, all of these are personal preferences that I'll get you to look at your own leisure so that you can go through them. The only one I do want to point out is the graphics option. In here, it'll automatically tell you what type of video card you're using. So you can see right now I'm using a laptop and it's using a GeForce GT NVIDIA card. If you're having any issues selecting things in our software when you're out in 3D or it downright crashes, 99% of the time it's because your video card doesn't have the latest driver. So we publish this information here so you can go out on the internet. I would go to nvidia.com and look for the latest driver for my GeForce card. Their drivers are free. They update them on a very regular basis. At sometimes you can see them change on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. And you'll always want to make sure you have the latest driver because the latest driver will take advantage of the latest changes in operating systems and the latest technology that's available for your card. And because we are a full 3D package, we're going to draw on your video card quite heavily. So you're going to want to make sure you have the latest drivers. So again, if you have problems selecting things or it's moving very slow in 3D or it downright crashes, you'll want to get the latest driver. We publish that right here under the graphics card. If at any time you're hesitant doing that, please do not hesitate to call us and talk to one of our technical support staff. They'll guide you through that process. They're here from Monday to Friday, 8:30 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, and that's exactly why they're here, so that you feel comfortable at any time using your software. If it's changing something like this and updating your video driver to trying to get you through to drawing a certain object that maybe is frustrating you, don't get to the point of frustration, call them. They're handy people, they're polite and kind people, and they have no issues with stepping you through anything to make sure that you get a good solid start in using the software. So that is all the different settings in our Program Settings dialog box. If you wanted to review that information again, remember at the top of all of our dialog boxes you'll find that question mark. That question mark will open up our help and it'll give you all of the information under all of the different settings that are in there so you can read about them again. And as a reminder, I am taping today's class and I'll be sending you out a link to it so that you can watch this again to go over all of these settings. So I'm just going to cancel out of this dialog box. And I'm going to take us into just one more dialog box before we start drawing and getting started with that. So at this time, I'm going to go to the Settings pull-down menu. And under the Settings pull-down menu, I'm going to go to Building Locations. This is absolutely the most important dialog box in our software. Having a good handle on the information that's in here will go a long way in drawing accurately in our software. Anytime you start to draw, whether it be a window, a door, a floor, or a ceiling, it's always going to look here first before it draws. So when you pick wall and start drawing wall, just know that in the background, it's reading this building locations information. So let's look at the information that's here. So in this highlighted line right now, the ground floor, I can see that the first column of information for the ground floor is the floor level. So I'm going to just draw a little simplistic diagram off here to the right. Just give me a moment here. I've got my foundation wall. I'm going to draw a sill plate. I've got my floor joist coming through, and there's my my subfloor, and then I've got my wall built on top of that. When we look at the floor level, it's asking you right here on floor level, what's the distance from grade to the top of the subfloor? So I'm telling right now that it's 1'5" and a half an inch away. I've got some exposed foundation, I've got my sill plate, my floor joist, and my subfloor to get me up to that value. On top of that then, sitting 6'8" above that subfloor is my head height, where I'm going to hang the top of my windows and my doors. That's my 6'8" value, the head height. 8 feet above that subfloor is my ceiling height. 8'1"1/8" is my wall height. So the top of that top plate I have of my wall is 8'1" 1/8" off of that subfloor. So when I go to start drawing a wall, it looks up here and says, okay, the wall that I'm drawing has to be 8'1" 1/8". The bottom of that wall I know is 1'5" and a half off of the terrain, off of my grade. When we click Add Location here, and we're building up new locations, there's a nice handy diagram in here that explains all of this information as well. So I'm going to add a new location and tell it I want to calculate it from this existing location. When I click OK, it says, okay, the existing location you were highlighted on was your ground floor. Here it is at the bottom. So if I am going, and I'm just going to erase all of the drawings that I had here, this is where I would fill in all of the information. What's my wall height? What's my ceiling height? What's my head height? What's the thickness of the sheathing I'm going to be putting on that floor? What's the structural width of that floor? So what is the thickness of the floor joists that I'm going to be using? Are they 2x10s? Am I using some TGIs? What's the width of those? Does it have a sill plate? Is this going to be my second floor where it doesn't have one? Am I using a 2x6? Am I using a 2x4? What's that width? With all of that information that I fill in, it'll then give me the automatic floor level and top of grade level there that I have. So it'll figure it all out for you. So when you're creating new locations, you don't have to worry. It'll do all of it as you need it to. Okay, but that's what these values are for. And just know that every time you go to draw, it's going to look here and fill in that information to say, okay, I'm drawing a wall, it's 8 foot high. Another thing to really pay attention if you're going to change these values is that all of these values, you'll notice 7 foot 6 inches. That foot sign is very important. The software always assumes inches. So if I typed 7 instead of 7 foot, I would only be 7 inches, not 7 feet below grade. So if you look at your model and think, wow, it looks like a mashup of walls here. I've got ground floor walls that are going into my second floor walls. What's going on? You can come in here and play with these floor level values, and they will automatically move your model for you. So if I had this foundation at only 7 inches, by typing -7 foot 6, it would then drop that location for me. The entire location would drop. All these locations, this floor level value is interactive. So if I make changes, the model will move it accordingly. The other columns of information, however, head height, ceiling height, wall height, they are not interactive. If I make a change, it will change new ceilings going in. new windows and doors going in, and new walls will be affected by the change. The walls that have already been placed were already set, and they're at the height that they went in at. The reason that we don't make these three interactive is, as I'm going to show you in a moment, all of our walls are fully customizable. So even though I put a wall in initially at 8 feet, I can slope that wall. I can make it stepped at the top or stepped at the bottom. I can change its height to any height that I want to. So with that in mind, if you came in here and made a sweeping change of 8-foot walls to 9-foot walls, after you already drew a whole bunch of walls, maybe sloped, or maybe the walls were stepped, or knee walls at only 4 foot, they'd all bounce right up to 9 feet again. You wouldn't want that. So walls that are inserted at the height at that moment, following the values that are in here. If you make changes in the future in this dialog box, it's only going to affect new walls going in, not the ones that are already there. The only column of information that is interactive is, again, the floor level. It will move the entire location up or down accordingly if you change these values, which is handy because you might get halfway through a design and say, you know, I had set those floor level values based on a 2x10, but I'm going to have to beef this up to some TGIs. That floor level is going to have to change. And then you can make that adjustment here and know that the whole model will move up and down accordingly. The little green check mark you see off to the left-hand side tells me what my current location is set to, so that when I leave this dialog box down here in the lower left-hand corner of my screen, whatever has a green check mark beside it will be recorded down there as my current location, and that's the location I'm going to start drawing on. So right now, it's set to the ground floor. So when I start drawing my model, and we start drawing the walls, it's going to start drawing them on the ground floor location. They'll be 1'5" and a half an inch above grade, and they'll be 8 foot tall. So let's see that happening. I'm just going to click OK. So those are all of our settings. And again, all of our dialog boxes have little tags to go to the help. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a question mark, and it will give you information about that dialog box, and you can read about those as well. So now I'm going to start drawing some walls to create a model to get us started. I always believe that before we even start drawing, we have to understand how the software thinks and works so that it helps us in understanding the software and using it. So I hope going through those program settings, I know, albeit very dull, was important information for you, and I hope that you understood it all. So I'm going to come here right now and click on the Walls tool. When I do that, the catalog panel in the right-hand side of my screen will show me all various different types of walls. And this gives me the ability to select one of those walls. I'll use let's use a stucco wall for our example today. I'll use 2x6 stucco. When I move my cursor out onto the drawing screen, notice how my cursor has changed. It's no longer an arrow to select things. It's showing 3 interconnected walls. Your cursor is always guiding you to tell you what you're doing. So if I click on, and just quickly I'll do this, the door tool, see how my cursor changes to a door? And when I click on the window tool, it'll look like a window. It's letting you know that you're ready to start drawing. When I'm initially laying out my exterior walls, I use a command that allows me to be very accurate. So as I move my cursor out here onto the drawing screen area, I immediately right-click. Left-clicking in our software starts you to draw something and to insert something. Right-clicking reveals options. So even before I start drawing, I want to reveal an option to help me draw accurately. And that option is Insert by Baseline. This tool, as you're going to see, will draw a single line diagram. I'm only going to see one single line being drawn. And I'm going to be able to type exact dimensions of how long that one line is. When I'm done drawing all the lines that outline the footprint of my exterior walls, I can then designate that that line is either the very outside edge of my stucco, or it's the very inside edge of my drywall, or it's the center line of my stud. So depending on the dimensions that you want to pull from it, and that you know, this helps you to use those very accurately. Let me show you. I'm going to choose Insert by Baseline. And then, just like I was drawing a regular wall, I just left-click once to get started. And as I move my cursor, it's drawing and trailing behind it that green line. I want to draw your attention down to the bottom of the screen, where you'll see distance and direction. This is where I can type in exact dimensions, how long I want this particular wall line. So I'm going to tell it that I want it to be 20 feet long. Remember the importance of the foot sign. Otherwise, this is 20 inches and not 20 feet. So I type 20 feet. The direction dialog box that you see beside that, as I move my cursor, notice how it's changing the direction. To the top of the screen is 90 degrees, to the left is 180, to the bottom is 270, and to the right is 0 degrees. I'm just pulling in that direction to let it know the direction I want to go, and I type 20 feet, and now I'm hitting the Enter key on my keyboard. I just drew the first length of 20 feet. Now I'm going to pull up. As I'm pulling up, you'll notice that it's drawing a polygon. It's always connecting back to that original start point. So think of it like an elastic band, and I'm just driving nails down, and where I'm driving that nail down, I'm driving this elastic band around those points to form the exterior shell of my building. So now as I pull up, I'm going to type in 10 feet and hit Enter. Now I'm going to pull to the right. And as I pull to the right, I'm going to type in 15 feet and hit Enter. Now I'm going to type in 20 feet, hit Enter, and now I'm going to come back to my original start point. As I'm pulling across, notice my original start point has that black square on it. That's our Snap Track tool. Because I hovered my cursor over that original start point, it forms that black square, and that dashed line, I hope you can see that over the internet, is formed to show me how to be perfectly in line with that point. So to be perfectly in line with my very first point, that last line that I have to draw is 35 feet long. We can see that in the distance below, and it's in the direction of 180 to the left. I'm going to hit Enter to accept that. The software doesn't know I'm done with all my points. I could keep drawing. You can see I can keep moving this kind of elastic line. When I'm done, I have to right-click and tell it that I'm finished. Now it's wondering, well, what do you want to do with this exterior line that you drew? What does it represent? Does it represent the outer face of your veneer? So is that green line and all the dimensions that I typed in, does it go from veneer to veneer? Or is it the outer face of my stud line? Or is it the inner face of my stud on the inside of the wall? So if you're in the position where maybe you're doing some remodel work and the house that you're working on, maybe you can only get to the inside. Maybe it's like a townhome situation or a duplex. You can't get to the exterior dimensions because it's attaching to the other part of that house. You could go in and get all your interior dimensions and say everything I typed in is to the inner face of the wall, or it's to the outer face of the stud, if these are stud dimensions that you want to type in to begin with. For my example today, I'm going to leave it at the outer face of veneer. So all the dimensions that I typed in, the 20 feet, the 10, the 15, they all represent stucco to stucco. And then I simply click OK. And it transforms that single line diagram into actual walls. So as I hover my cursor over one of them, it's going to bring up that little tooltip to tell me that that's a 2x6 stucco wall. And if I left click on one of those walls, notice the dimensions, 20 feet, 10 feet. It knows those exact dimensions that I typed in because I used and told it that was from veneer to veneer. When you left click and select a wall that you've already inserted, you'll notice a couple of things. The wall itself will highlight itself green, letting you know that this is the wall that you selected. You'll also notice on that wall that there's a green square, a blue square, and a red square. Those are called grips. The green square represents where you started drawing that wall. The red square represents where you stopped drawing that wall. And the blue square is the absolute middle. If I put my cursor near the blue square in the middle, notice again my cursor change. My cursor is no longer an arrow, but it's showing 4 arrows. This is our move cursor. It's letting me know that I'm on that blue square that's like a hinge point. So if I hold down my left mouse button and move it, keeping it held down, that wall is going to move with me. So when I drop it, it's going to drop it where my cursor was. Now, if I put my cursor over top of a dimension, notice again my cursor change. Now my cursor looks like a hand. Anytime your cursor rests on top of a dimension, it's going to look like a hand, telling you that you're ready to select that dimension and change it. So I'm going to left click on that dimension. Changing this dimension will move the wall that is highlighted. The wall that you highlight is the wall that's going to move when you change this dimension. So when I change this dimension to be 10 feet, it's going to move this highlighted wall up until it's 10 feet away from the other wall. So when I click OK, you'll see that that's happened. The wall that is highlighted is the wall that is going to move. If I click on the dimension that is parallel to that wall, so this 20-foot dimension, if I change this dimension, it then wants to know, using the arrows that are beside the dimension here, which way I want to change it. So if I was to change this dimension to 15 feet, what end of the wall is going to move? Am I moving the right side of the wall, or am I moving the left side of the wall, out or in? Okay, so when you move a dimension, if you click on a dimension that is perpendicular to the wall that's highlighted is the one that's going to move. If you click on a dimension that's parallel to the wall that you've selected, that's when you'll see these arrows appear. Which part of the wall is going to move to accommodate the change in that dimension that you're going to make. Okay, so I'm just going to click cancel there, and we'll hold these dimensions. Once I've selected a wall, I can right-click. Right-clicking, remember, in our software reveals options. So I left-click to insert something, I left-click to select something, but I right-click every time I want to see an option. So now that I've highlighted that wall, I'm seeing the options that I have for this wall. So with this wall, I can say, oops, I didn't mean to select it, I'm going to deselect it. Or I can say, select everything that's similar. So every type of wall that's the same as this wall would all be selected at the same time. So what I do to one, I do to all of them. And that's very handy. I can look at the properties of this wall. I can delete it. I can move it, just like we move. See, it's the same type of cursor right beside it as we did by just hovering our cursor over that blue grid. I can rotate this wall. I can duplicate it. I could make a copy of it. Elevate means I could move it up or down. So if I needed it to move up for one particular reason or another, maybe this is a raised bungalow and this one wall needs to move up or move down, I could do that. I could duplicate it to a location, which means I want a copy of this wall on my second floor or on my foundation in that exact same position. I can duplicate it up or down. Very handy as well. I could mirror it. I could replace it. If I click replace as an example, it'll take me back to my catalog where I can select now what different type of wall I'd want it to be. Maybe I want it to be 2x6 stucco, but I want it to have a stone base. With that selection, and I click OK, now if I put my cursor near that wall, it will tell me 2x6 stucco with stone base on the ground floor. If I hover my cursor over one of the other walls that I didn't change, you can see it's just 2x6 stucco. So it quickly allows you, even though I've drawn the entire footprint using that boundary command, I can quickly replace one of the walls to be something different. Okay, I'm going to click on our wall tool again. And this time, I'm going to start inserting some interior walls. So I'm going to scroll down in my selection, and I'm going to grab an interior wall. I'm also going to use the zoom window tool down here at the bottom. By clicking on that zoom window tool and holding down my left mouse button, it'll create a box. And what's inside that box, when I release my left mouse button, will magnify in the screen. So it allows you to get a better visual of what I'm drawing. my wall command stays active. You can see my cursor still looks like a wall. I want to start this new wall off in this corner. Notice my cursor change as I get it close to that corner. See the circle with an X? That's our object snap. It's found that object, and by left-clicking right there, I know that I'm forming a nice, clean intersection. I'm going to look for the same thing as I drag my cursor upwards, and I come to the perpendicular wall above. As soon as I have my cursor inside it, I left-click again, and I've formed that nice, clean intersection. I want to draw another wall. I'm going to right-click. Right-clicking reveals the option for the time, Enter Insertion Offset. By using Enter Insertion Offset, I'm telling it a distance I want to start this wall away from a corner. I want to start 5 feet away from a corner. I click OK. My cursor, as I move it around, can only be 5 feet away from the various corners. I can't move it any closer or any further away. It only wants to snap to positions that are 5 feet away. As soon as I see that dimension sitting in the location where I want it to be, all I have to do is left click. And now it's 5 feet away from that corner. As I move my cursor, look again towards the bottom of the screen. This is where I could type in distances and direction. I'm not holding down my left mouse button at this point. In our software, again, it's left click, left click. It's not a drag motion. I've set it to left click and then left click. So now that I've left clicked once, I'm simply moving my cursor. And then on my keyboard, I'm going to type 5 foot. And you'll notice that distance automatically appears in the distance box. And then I hit enter. But now I want to go up on an angle. And I can't because we have ortho on. So I want to turn ortho off. And I'm going to turn angle snap on. Now you'll notice my cursor and look at the direction dialog box down below. I'm only moving in 15-degree increments because that's the restriction of angle snap. So I'm going to come up on a 45-degree direction, and I'm going to type in again 5 feet. So 5 feet in the 45-degree direction, hit enter, there it is, and then I can pull up straight 90, and I'll go up 5 feet, hit enter, but now I want an oddball angle. That's where I would turn off angle snap as well. And now look, I can go at any odd angle that there is. My direction there can go to anything that I want it to go to. So I can pull down in any odd angle. Okay, so if you want to have ortho on, that means I'm restricted to straight up and down 90-degree intersections. Angle snap will restrict me to 15. Turning both of them off will allow me to go to any angle. And then I left click again. I'm going to right click right now and tell it that I'm finished drawing walls. When I do that, my cursor reverts back to looking like an arrow, meaning I can select things. I'm no longer inserting walls. I'm going to select this wall right here, this interior wall. Notice the green, the red, the blue grip. Notice the dimensions. Those can all be selected just like we did with the exterior wall. I'm going to right click right again to reveal my options. And then I'm going to choose duplicate. I want to make a copy of this wall. Duplicate. As soon as I choose duplicate, look at my cursor. It's already in that move orientation. So I put it over top of that blue grip in the middle, hold down my left mouse button, and a copy of that wall moves along with me. And when I release my mouse button, there it is. So I've made a copy of that wall over. Now I can select this wall right here, and I'm going to zoom and use that zoom window tool again so we can see this nice and big on the screen. I want to stretch this wall over to meet this wall. I'm going to put my cursor over top of that green grip. Notice the cursor change. As soon as I get it over top of that green grip, my cursor looks like a wall with an arrow. When I see that cursor change, I hold down the left mouse button and I don't let go until I stretch it over to meet the other wall. I'm going to zoom in on the lower end here, and I'm going to select the wall tool again. I'm going to come off of this corner, left click, wait till I see the circle with an X, the object snap coming to the other corner, left click, and I've formed the walls there as well. So you can duplicate walls. You can insert walls by using our boundary tool. You can use the insertion offset tool, or you can just left click and left click. Many different ways to insert the walls so that you can put them in exactly where you want them to go. Many different options on moving them later, clicking on them, stretching them, holding down the left mouse button on the blue grip, clicking on the dimensions that appear and telling it the exact distance that you want it away from a corner. You've got lots of different options for forming those walls. Now I want to look at the properties that are behind the walls themselves. So I'm going to left click on one of our walls, either interior or exterior, and again you can see as they highlight they get their little grip information around them. I left click to select the wall, and then I right click, and one of my right click options is properties. I want to look at the properties that are behind this particular wall. That'll bring up our walls dialog box, and this pulls up all the information that's behind this wall that gives it its intelligence. So here on the basic tab, we can see that this is a framed wall. And as soon as it's set to be a framed wall, that's when at the bottom of this dialog box, it gives itself a framing member. So this wall is going to be framed with 2x6s. So when we go into a framing view, we'll see all the 2x6s laid out along this wall. The width of the wall itself, the core, is 5.5 inches. So the core represents our 2x6 stud portion of the wall. You can also notice that I could put this wall invisible in 2D. So if I didn't want to see it in my 2D drawings, I could have it invisible. The one example I can think of off the top of my head is where you'd want to make a wall invisible is dormer walls. If you don't want them showing up on your ground floor plan, but they're in there as part of your roof plan, you can make them invisible so they don't show up in the floor plan, but they're obviously there in elevations and they're there in 3D views. They're just invisible in 2D. Then underneath that we have our exterior width. So my stucco is 3/4 of an inch thick. I have an airspace here of 1 inch. And the airspace encompasses if you're leaving an actual airspace and also the wall sheathing thickness as well. So if I had 1/2 inch wall sheathing and then I had an airspace or some strapping, whatever comes between the exterior stud line and the inside face of your finish, exterior finish, that's what we encompass in that airspace. Next we have lower face bottom. And when I click on lower face bottom, this little diagram to the right is going to update. And it illustrates very nicely what it's calling out there. So this portion of the wall where I have my cursor on right now is our stud. And then I'm looking at our stucco finish. And I want to drop down the exterior stucco finish to cover over my floor joists, my sill plate. So it's coming right down to either my floor slab, if this was slab on grade, or the top of my foundation wall if I was building a basement or a foundation system. So that brings that down to that level. You can also raise the exterior face top. So even though your studs has stopped, the exterior face can go up so it's hidden behind your fascias and your eave. The also part of this wall is your interior surface portion of it. So my drywall is 1/2 inch thick. We can have an airspace between that. And again, that airspace is just representative of the distance between the exterior face of the stud and also the finish. So if there was sound bats in there, sound clips, anything that's between the drywall and the stud wall, that's where you would put in that distance there. It's just allowing you to make that distance come out. We're framing this as automatically being a load-bearing wall. There's 3 different settings for load-bearing versus non-load-bearing. No, it is not a load-bearing wall. Yes, it is a load-bearing wall, or auto. And what auto means is that if it's an exterior wall, it's automatically going to make it a load-bearing wall. If it's an interior wall, it's automatically going to deem it as a non-load-bearing wall. And then if it is a load-bearing or non-load-bearing wall, you can come back into this dialog box and switch it to yes or no. So if it is an interior wall that happens to have to be a load-bearing wall, you could just simply set that to yes. And there are walls, which you will notice in the catalog, that say 2x6 interior load-bearing, and those have it already set to load-bearing. With our walls, they're automatically set as well to export out energy efficiency information. And this wall is set to yes, be included in that energy calculation. It's saying it's a normal wall type. It has an R value of 20, and if it had a continuous R value, you could also set that as well. Now I'm going to flip to the top and bottom tab of this wall. This is where we determine the height of a wall. So as we picked that wall out of the catalog, remember it looked up to our building locations information and said, this wall needs to be 8 foot 1 1/8. And it already made it that height. So when we pop into 3D later, we're going to see that. But here under the wall top, if we needed to change that, if we wanted it to be a specific height, we would set it to level, and then we could type in that height right here. So if this was to be a knee wall, or we wanted it to be a raised height, we could type in the exact value we wanted that height to be. Or if we were going to slope the wall, this is where we can define the slope. I'm going to move this dialog box out of the way here. Remember when we were looking at the walls, we had the green grip and the red grip? Looking in this diagram, we also have green grip, red grip. So we have to refer back out to our model. What's the height of the green dot? That's our A value. What's the height of our red dot? That's our B value. So if you have a staircase and you need to slope a wall, there's an excellent opportunity to do that here, and you could define those two different heights. That's also the same for our stepped option. Again, it's looking for the height of the wall at the green dot, the height of the dot, the red dot, and what is the maximum step? What do you want the steps between each point to be till it meets that new height? And then that's the maximum that it can be. So if I say that the maximum step is 2 feet, it can't go over that, but it can certainly go under that to meet the two different heights. We also have auto extend, and that's going to be the default option for all of our exterior walls. Auto extend means that as soon as I place a roof on top of this wall, if I change the plate height of the roof, maybe I want to make it 10 feet, this wall will automatically extend up to that new plate height of the roof. So you don't have to come back later and change the height of the wall. It automatically extends to meet the roof. And that would be true for gable ends as well. It will automatically fill in the gable end portion of that wall and changing its height. Very handy feature. It allows you to quickly modify a roof and know that the walls underneath it will automatically change with it as well. Not only can we change the wall top, but we can change the wall bottom down here as well. We can slope it, we can step it with the same understanding that we had for sloping and stepping with the wall top. Or we can keep it just level, sitting at the floor level that we defined in our building locations. When we're defining a wall, we can automatically assign trim to the wall as well. There are different sides to a wall. If it's an interior wall, it'll have a left and a right side. And if it's an exterior, obviously it'll have an exterior as well. Each of those different sides can have different types of trim associated to it. So if it was an interior wall, as an example, maybe the left-hand side of that wall is in a finished room and you wanted to have crown molding, maybe some chair rail, a nice height baseboard, but the right-hand side of that wall was in a closet where you might not want to put the crown molding, you might want to spare that expense, so you could have it taken off on that side of the wall. You wouldn't have crown defined, it would be none selected. So this is when we're drawing the wall. If I scoot this one around, you can see the base of this wall automatically has trim baseboard on it. If I was to punch an opening into the wall, casing would automatically fill around it as well based on the selections that I make here too. The Appearance tab. The Appearance tab looks not only at the 3D appearance of the wall itself, but also the 2D line work that's associated to it. All the components of the wall are listed here on the left-hand side. So I have my exterior surface, and I can see I've got stucco, and if I was to put it in a pattern view, the hatch pattern that it would have. The left interior surface, there's the paint color that it's chosen. There's no hatch pattern associated to it. And the right-hand side, openings, the color of paint that they would get as well. And then in the components list, we see 2D core. And this is dealing with the line work. The color of the line is going to be red for the 2D core, and we could see that if we zoomed in a little bit closer. And it's going to be a solid line according to its layer. Exterior, we can see that it's blue, and we can definitely see that blue happening there, and that's the color of that line. Interior line is going to be that green color, and 2D right inside is also going to be the green, and we can kind of see that occurring there as well. So this is where they would get all of their colors. You'll also notice down at the bottom of the screen there's that solid fill. Remember that check mark in our program settings? As soon as I check that off, it automatically puts in the solid fill. So we can see that our 2D core and exterior surface, everything has got that solid fill nicely set in there, checked off, and a color chosen so that it will automatically solid fill for us. For those of you that are using our Building Essentials and Construction Suite software, when I click on quantity here, you'll also see that there's quantity information associated to this wall as well. These are all the materials that it's going to take off when we draw this wall. So that's all the quantity information. For those of you that have ProArchitect, when you click on the screen, it will be blank. It's quantifying them in the background. It doesn't give you the opportunity to edit and change them, but it is giving you a basic quantity as well. Okay, so I'll hit cancel there, and that's all the information that's behind a wall. So if you want to customize anything about that wall, whether it be the trim that's associated to it, the color of the line work, the materials that it's using, that's where you can change and update all of that information about that particular wall itself as well. Before we get into our question and answer period, though, I also want to just quickly touch on viewing the model in different view types. So throughout this entire webinar so far, I've been using this 2D blueprint view, which I'm circling around in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. But now I'm going to flip it over, and we're going to look at the 2D designer's view. And the 2D designer's view gives me still that top-down look, but it gives me the finished materials. So this is a nice view if you're doing a layout view, a presentation drawing, and want to put some furniture in. It'll show them the finished materials that you're selecting, but in that floor plan view. This is also very handy if there's any landscape architects in our crowd today. If I had my plant material and my flower beds and my sidewalks all finished, this is a nice presentation view for the exterior finish and the landscape view of the home as well. The next button that I have over is our 3D camera view, and I'm going to select on it next. And when I click on it, it allows me to look at my model in a 3D perspective, 3D overview, or to place the camera. So I'm going to choose all three to show you the difference. 3D perspective view looks down and I'm standing down and to the left of my model, looking over to the right, and it automatically puts me in that perspective. If I switch it to a 3D overview, this is again another automatic camera that looks up and coming down from the right, looking down at my model. If I put it back into a 2D plan view by clicking on the 2D plan button, the other option is to place a new camera under the camera views option. So I'm going to hit place new camera. That will put a little, it looks like almost like a 1980s beta camcorder, to be honest, attached to my cursor. Where I left click is where I'm going to be standing when I'm in 3D. Then I move my cursor and an arrow attaches to it. That arrow is going to be where I'm looking. So where I left click right now is going to be my view when I switch to a 3D view. So my first left click is where I stand, my second left click is where I'm viewing. And now I'm in that 3D view. So I can bring myself right into a particular room. Now that I'm in 3D, down in the lower right-hand corner where I'm moving my cursor around right now, these are our navigational tools. The first one I'm going to use is our walk around tool. It looks like a pair of feet. When I click on that tool, you'll notice that I have a pair of feet as my cursor. If I hold down my left mouse button and pull forward, I move forward. If I hold down my left mouse button and pull back, I move backwards. So you can move forward and backwards, side to side, using this tool. And it's just holding down your left mouse button. The next tool that you see beside that particular tool, and I'm just going to move this out to the outside, is our fly around tool. This one, if I hold down my left mouse button and pull down, it's going to go around the target point. So it's like there's a pinpoint in where I was looking, and my camera is rotating around it. So this is pretty handy for exterior views, so you can go around the exterior of the home and see exactly what it's going to look like from the exterior. The navigational tool beside it is called our look around tool. This tool acts the exact opposite. This allows me to move my head around, so my target is moving, but my camera point is stationary. So it's like I'm standing in one room and looking around. That's very handy for interior views, especially in a tight space, so that you can look around that space better. We also have pan, so I can pan across and over just by holding again down my left mouse button. These may appear very jerky over the internet, but as you play with these tools, you'll find that they are very quick, easy flowing tools. Again, if they are working really slow on your computer, or they're just not working at all, that's when you need to update your graphics driver. If I don't even know where I've gone to, I've played with these cameras and all of a sudden I'm way off in space, the very last tool that you see there is the Reset the Camera tool. It will place me exactly where the camera was when I originally placed it. Reset the camera. So not only were we drawing in our 2D plan, but we were drawing in our 3D model. There's also 3D quick views, and that's the next tool down at the very bottom of the screen that I'm pointing to right now with the arrow. This tool, when I pick on it, it will give me different vantage points that I can look at from my model. So the blue square in the middle is representative of my model. Do I want to look at it from a lower left corner, a lower right? So I just pick on the arrow where I want to look at my model from, and it instantly transports me out in 3D to look at my model from there. And you can see I can use my navigational tools to navigate around the model in this type of view as well. Okay. I'm going to return it back down to a 2D view. I just want to recap everything that we've went over today on getting started. Today is about getting you started on understanding all of the settings and getting you started drawing some walls. Before we recap, I do want to bring you up to our website, www.cadsoft.com. For those of you that are unaware, on our website, up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see Client Center. I'm clicking on that right now. This is where you can go to find out more information and look for more tutorials and more classes. So any kind of webinars that we hold, and these are free classes for anyone on the current version, will be here under our webinars option. There you'll see a list of all the various classes. So next week's class is on roofs. So if you're interested in learning about roofs, tune in Tuesday, February the 9th at 2 o'clock. It's a 1-hour class, and you can learn about roofs. And then columns and beams and framing and bathroom design. Every week is a different class. Down at the bottom of this page is where you can access the webinar archive. This is where we put our taped broadcasts. So if you can't happen to be at your computer on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock, then you can tune in later whenever you need to and go into the webinar archive and watch them at your leisure. I'll be placing today's 2-hour special class up there for you. Also under our Client Center, you'll find a tutorial section. The tutorial section is all types of videos and books that you can read on all various topics of our software. So if you're just new to the software, this is a great way to learn and to pick up more information about all the various tools. There's lots you can do in the software. It's very powerful, and this will help you to learn all of those various tools. There's also a forum, and in our forum, you can register and you can post your questions online. That goes out to all of our clients around the world, so that if it's a Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock and you're trying to work on a project, someone else around the world might be looking at that forum and be able to answer your questions for you. So that gives you kind of 24 access to help, from peer-to-peer kind of help. So before we get to questions, let's just recap what we learned today. First, we started off under the Settings pull-down menu, Program Settings. This is what we call the brain of the software. This is all those little settings that are going to help you to be drawing accurately and to automatically save your work. We looked at the drawing aids, we looked at the building aids, and we also set our unit of measure. These are, again, tools to help you be accurate. We also went up to Settings and chose Building Locations, and this particular dialog box I noted was the most important dialog box in our software. When I go to draw anything, it's going to look here first to make sure that it's at the right height and it's at the right level. So make sure before you start drawing, you double check all these values to make sure they're relevant for the type of project that you're working on. We then started drawing walls. And when we started drawing walls, I first started by right-clicking and using our Insert by Baseline method. Remember, that drew a single line diagram and allowed me to type in exact dimensions so all of my wall lengths were accurate right from the get-go. Then we started drawing walls by picking points, looking for our object snap. We also used our offset option, so I would type in an exact dimension I wanted to be away from a corner. I turned off ortho, so I could draw up on an angle. And then I duplicated walls as well. We also replaced the very front wall by selecting it and right-clicking and choosing Replace. Remembering, right-clicking reveals all of the options in the software. We left-clicked to insert, we right-clicked to view an option. We looked at the properties of the wall to see all the various things that we can change and customize about a wall. Now what I would like to do is answer all of your questions that you might have about getting started. So in that GoToMeeting console that's on the right-hand side of your screen, that's where you can type in questions. So I invite you to type all of your questions that you might have there now, and then I'll be able to answer those for you live during our broadcast. At the end of our broadcast, I will be downloading the videotaping of this webinar, and I'll be uploading it to our YouTube page, so you will be receiving an email with a link to it. So let's get to our questions first of all. Why is the settings section all grayed out? I can't modify anything. If you notice that settings are all grayed out, it's because you haven't started a new project yet. First, you should go to File and New. Select one of the available templates that you see there. Hit Create. And then once you have the drawing set up and ready to go, that's when you should be able to go to Settings and Program Settings. You just haven't started a new project yet to change the settings for it. What is the best way to orient the house plan to a site plan? Well, let me close out this drawing and go back to the one we were working on. So here I have the house plan drawn, and now I want to draw the site plan. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to go to our Terrain tab to insert a site boundary. What I would do is I would always leave the house itself where it's sitting. Instead of rotating it to an odd angle, I would always choose the site plan to be at the odd angle. So when I'm inserting the site plan, you'll notice down at the bottom of the screen, I've got my northing and easting, my distance, and my direction. I would change those directions so that the house stays on this angle. For printing purposes, it's better for it to be in this orientation other than being at an angle, and you can always change them. So I'm just going to change the angle. So I could have my site plan doing something like that. That's the orientation, that's the house sitting on it. And then when I put it onto a working drawing sheet, I can insert a north arrow and pointing north where it would actually be. I wouldn't rotate the house per se, because then it's off on all of your working drawing sheets. I would rotate the site boundary. And if I needed to select it and rotate it afterwards, I can always rotate the site plan. It's easier to rotate the site plan than all of the walls, doors, windows, roof, various locations later. Rotate the site plan. That's our only 2 questions that are up there. So I hope that means that everybody's got a good handle on the information that I covered today. But if you do have any further questions, I'm going to hold this webinar open for another 5 minutes, just in case somebody thinks of a last-minute question that they might have. So if there is a question, make sure you post it. May seem silly to you, but it's probably in the minds of other people watching the webinar as well. Any question is a good question to ask. And with our classes that are on the weekly basis that you find up on our webinar page back on our website here under webinars, those are also taped. You can also see those in our archive, and they all include a little booklet that will be emailed out to you as well. So do make sure you register for those classes and make sure you ask lots of questions for those. Okay, I went to the archives and it asked me for a password. Is that the same for the forum? No, it's not the same password for the forum. The forum is going to be your own personal password. The password for the archives is a generic one. And in today's class, when we send out the follow-up email, that password will be included in it. We'll use the username and the password that you need for the archive. So we will include that in the email that's going to follow from after this class today. And that seems to be all of our questions. I'll leave it just for a couple more seconds just in case someone is thinking about asking a question. Otherwise, we'll end the webinar and we'll hope to see you back on Tuesday at 2 o'clock for our roofs webinar. And that does seem to be all of our questions. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Oh, hold on. There is another question coming up here. The question is, where did the 10'4" and 5/8 measurement come from in the building locations? So let me flip back to my model. And I'm going to go up to Settings, Building Locations. So the question is, where did this 10'4" and 5/8 come from? What's that floor level? Well, if I draw our little diagram again, here's grade. Here's my foundation sticking up above grade. Here's my sill plate. Excuse my crude drawing. Here's my floor joist. Here's my subfloor. Here's my walls. And that's to say the full height of our ground floor walls. And then I'm going to have our floor joist sitting on it and our second floor. So that takes us the entire distance from grade all the way up to that second floor. So not only is it the 1'5" and ½ inch to get us to the ground floor, but it's plus the 8'1" and 1/8 of our wall floor height of our wall, and then it's the thickness of our floor joist and our subfloor. So if you took 1'5" and ½ inch, and you took the 8'1" and 1/8, plus the thickness of our floor joist, which is they probably left 9½ and maybe a ½ inch for sheathing, all of that added together will equate to the 10'4" and 5/8. So that's the distance. The floor level is always from grade to that floor location. And remember, if you're having a hard time thinking about these values, always come to the Add Location dialog box and fill in these values, and it will automatically tabulate it for you. Okay, Okay, that seems to be our last question there. I'll let that sit for another 30 seconds, and if there's no further questions, then we will call it a day and send out the email with the password for the archive. Just give it half a day for the video of today's class to be uploaded to YouTube. It has to be reformatted coming from GoToMeeting. And then once that's done, we will load it right up for you. Well, that does seem to be all of our questions. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you found it informative, and I hope to see you in an upcoming webinar on Tuesdays at 2 o'clock. And remember, if you do have any questions, never hesitate to call our technical support line. They're open Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 5, and they're more than happy to help you. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.